This is Rosa Hill, and she is currently sitting in the middle of a total nightmare. To the police in the interrogation room, she looks like a desperate mother caught on the losing side of a bitter, broken relationship. It's a clean, tragic explanation. But as investigators begin to peel back the layers, they begin to realize that Rosa isn't what police think she is. What started out as a standard domestic dispute had quietly evolved into a highly classified family operation. A plan so calculated and so cold that involved logistics that police didn't think were possible. The digital blueprint that they would eventually recover from a shared family computer was so baffling and bizarre that Netflix dedicated a true crime episode to it. But to understand the terrifying hidden truth behind what Rosa was actually doing in that hallway she was discovered in, we need to back up to the very beginning. Eric Hill wasn't just drifting through life looking for love. He was a standard, reliable professional, working a stable job in Oakland as an eligibility technician for the Alameda County Social Services Office. It's a workplace built on routine, bureaucracy, and paperwork. Sitting in that same office, working the exact same job, was an older woman named Mai Lee. She worked with Eric, recognizing him as a stable, good-natured guy, and decided to play matchmaker. In late 2002, Mai introduced Eric to her daughter, Rosa Lee. To Eric, it felt like a classic wholesome relationship, the ultimate endorsement from a trusted colleague. But seeping under the surface was a dark secret that nobody would see coming. However, Eric fell fast, and by 2005, they were married. The initial domestic integration for these newlyweds began under a shared roof inside of Rosa's mother, May, and her father, Ping Lee's Antioch home for the first couple months of their marriage. Financial and logistical data from this period outlines a trajectory that quickly began to sour. Friends and family would initially describe Rosa as rather odd. When the newlywed couple would visit friends and family, naturally they would ask Rosa questions. But Rosa would not answer the questions directly. She would take a step back and whisper inside of Eric's ear, to which Eric would end up answering the questions for her. That would peg Rosa as being, maybe she was just shy. But underneath that, it would end up being a form of control. For the first few years, the marriage looked like the ideal life that Mai Lee had envisioned for her daughter. The young couple relocated and bought a condo in Fremont, California. They welcomed a baby girl named Elizabeth and settled into a life of young parenthood. But behind the closed doors, the relationship was actually rotting. Behind the closed doors of their Fremont condo, the mask was starting to slip. Rosa wasn't just unhappy with their marriage. She was becoming obsessed with total systemic control of Eric's life. She pushed him harder and harder to work more and more and make more money, while Rosa remained at home with no job, only taking care of the household and their daughter. Eric, working 2 jobs and barely getting any sleep, seeing less and less of his family, would spark a deep depression and further tension in the household. By 2007, the marriage had completely collapsed. Eric packed his bags and moved in with his grandma, Selma Hill, in a quiet home in Dublin, California. The courts awarded Rosa with primary custody to their daughter Elizabeth, leaving Eric with only supervised visitation rights to his daughter. As the divorce papers were filed, the quiet domestic friction didn't just break, it detonated. Realizing she couldn't win a fair fight in the family court, Rosa decided to play a card that would ensure Eric never saw his daughter again. Rosa went to war. She leveled the ultimate accusation, telling Child Protective Services that Eric was actively molesting their 2-year-old daughter. It was a devastating radioactive allegation designed to destroy Eric permanently. Eric's government job at the Alameda County Social Services Agency in Oakland took the allegation very seriously, and Eric was put on suspension from his job pending an investigation. This just further increased the mental stress on Eric, leading to an acceleration in psychological deterioration. The system did not react the way that Rosa had planned. It immediately launched a forensic audit of both parents. A CPS investigator named Carolyn Locativo interviewed the family and immediately flipped the target. She noticed the numerous red flags in Rosa's paranoid tendencies and erratic behavior. In a report to Alameda Family Court, noted that Rosa was a direct threat to their toddler, while simultaneously Eric was cleared of any wrongdoing from the investigation of his government job into the accused and alleged molestation of his daughter. The Alameda Family Court stepped in clinically. They ordered a psychologist to mediate and ordered psychological evaluations. The data from those reports indicated severe psychological instability in Rosa. By August of 2008, the judge handed down a definitive, catastrophic legal order. Rosa was stripped of her full custody, and instead it was awarded 100% legal control to Eric, as well as 85% physical custody. Rosa Lee was officially cornered by the state, and that was the exact moment when the physical and legal custody battle ended and the tactical deployment began. Meanwhile, police were witness to increasing evasive answers to their questions, and Rosa's assumed role as battered ex-wife soon began to unravel. While at the same time, a mere 50 feet away in a soundproof interrogation room sat Mai Lee, Rosa's mother, who was also being actively interrogated to see if their stories could be corroborated. Rosa's mother had been severely battered and was bleeding profusely from her face by what would turn out to be a violent rage from Eric, who had struck her multiple times with a telescoping police baton. Meanwhile, Rosa herself was dressed in all black with a long trench coat and displayed an absurdly calm demeanor, answering questions directly. However, her story just didn't seem to add up. When the marriage finally shattered in 2007, Eric Hill needed a safe place to rebuild his life and protect his young daughter. He found it in Dublin, California, at the home of his 91-year-old grandma, Selma Hill. Selma was the beloved matriarch of the family, a kind, fiercely independent woman who opened her doors to give her grandson a sanctuary. To Eric, this quiet suburban house on Pepper Tree Lane was a shield against the chaos of his collapsing marriage. He had no idea by seeking safety under his grandma's roof, he would unknowingly drag her directly into the crosshairs of a pressurizing violent vendetta that was only building. While Eric was establishing residency in Selma's property, the legal warfare was only escalating. Rosa Hill had lost everything, and the quiet home on Pepper Tree Hill, where Selma Hill resided and Eric held full custody, became the target location for a tactical family deployment. Every parent claims that they would do absolutely anything to protect their child. It's the ultimate expression in human love. They would cross any line, fight any battle, and burn any bridge just to keep the family whole. It's a beautiful but desperate human lie, because inside of the room where Rosa resided, that exact sentiment was not used to protect a child. It was used for a cold-blooded execution. Selma Hill was left widowed years earlier when her husband passed away, but her sweet demeanor would lead her into an elderly relationship with a man named Lester Rowe. Lester and Selma's relationship was one that was built on a rigid schedule. On the days that they didn't see each other and actually hang out, they would always talk on the phone at exactly 4 p.m. every single day. Now, one day, when Lester could not reach Selma, she didn't pick up the phone after repeated calls. Concern was raised by Lester as to whether Selma was actually okay. On January 7th of 2009, police were dispatched to Selma's home after a 911 call was put in by Selma's neighbor, who was accompanied by Selma's son Eric after doing a welfare check on Selma. Now, this is going to be key, and you're about to find out why. As the neighbor stood outside of the home while Eric went inside to search the entire house, the silence was shattered by a series of popping sounds that could be heard very loudly outside of the home, as well as a man screaming inside of the house saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Terrified that they were hearing gunshots, the neighbors didn't stick around to investigate. They actually ran close by to a different neighbor's house to get help. In the background of the noise reports, Eric Hill can be heard screaming, "Wait, wait, wait," and "Help, Jeff, help." Police make entry at 5:53 p.m. When the Alameda County Sheriff deputies arrived just minutes later, they didn't wait for a warrant. They breached the front door based on the audible exigent circumstances, Specifically, a male voice from upstairs shouting, "Please don't kill me. I don't want to die. Don't. Don't." When deputies kicked in the front door, they were greeted by the quiet dignity of a grandmother's home. They walked into a frantic, bloody struggle for survival. Eric was pinned to the stairs, physically fighting off his ex-wife and mother-in-law, who were swarming him with the kind of ferocity you only see of people who believe they have nothing to lose. The air was thick with the scent of pepper spray and the metallic tang of blood. In that moment, Rosa Hill looked like a panicked mother caught in a domestic explosion. But as the deputies secured the rooms, they found evidence that this explosion was a meticulously managed job site. Stashed near the entry of the home were heavy-duty plastic tarps, rolls of duct tape, and pre-packed go bag for the toddler and a murder kit. The presence of these items turned the hallway struggle from a crime of passion into a professional forensic cleanup in progress, from a well-calculated mastermind plan. But once the handcuffs clicked shut and the scene was secured, the distraught mother narrative began to disintegrate under forensic scrutiny. Police discovered Eric had been shot multiple times with a taser and struck with a baton. But the primary threat was a loaded 9mm semi-automatic handgun recovered from the hallway floor. Deputies transported Rosa Hill to the Dublin Police Services substation for a custodial interrogation. While she sat in the windowless room, offering investigators a convoluted story of self-defense and accidental struggle, a secondary team was conducting a grid search of the property. In the backyard, hidden inside a plastic trash receptacle, they found the body of 91-year-old Selma Hill. The grandmother hadn't just been caught in the crossfire. She had been neutralized hours before Eric ever arrived. Rosa was no longer being questioned about a domestic dispute. She was the lead subject in a capital murder audit. Inside the interrogation rooms of that Dublin Police Services substation, Rosa and her mother, Mai Lee, were separated for the first time in years. They had spent months as a unified front. Two women bound by a singular obsessive goal to reclaim their family at any cost. To the detectives, Mai Lee presented an image of a devoted elderly grandmother, a woman who had only been there to support her daughter during a difficult time. They spoke of fear, of Eric's alleged temper, and of a struggle that simply got out of hand. It was a performance of shared trauma, two women painting themselves as victims of a system that had forced their hand. But the forensic reality of the situation was far more sterile. When investigators questioned the women about their story of a frantic struggle, it all fell apart because they knew that the women had arrived at Selma's house with tactical gear, such as a taser, a stun gun, and a 9mm firearm. The truth really came out when they questioned them about the timeline of Selma Hill's death. While Rosa Hill maintained a narrative of a sudden hallway confrontation, the autopsy displayed something quite different, saying that Selma Hill was actually strangled hours earlier. Her body meticulously placed in a 32-gallon trash receptacle. When detectives began an audit of the family's shared digital assets, the devoted mother facade collapsed completely. They recovered a hidden directory on the computer with a document titled Operation Custody. Now, it wasn't a diary and it wasn't a plea for help. It was a forensic checklist that detailed the exact logistics of the ambush that they would later commit. It also had plans of how to dispose of the bodies plural, and research into a specific paralyzing agent. They had research to ensure that Eric Hill could not fight back. So, while Rosa and Mai Lee were inside of that interrogation room, spinning stories of a family dispute gone wrong, forensic analysts were actually inside of their homes investigating everything, and they were about to unlock the true heart of the Rosa Hill family home. Inside of that family computer, hidden behind layers and layers of regular old standard files and photos you would see on any computer, was that hidden directory. And this would actually be the nerve center for that plot that they've been planning for months. And unfortunately for them, they actually wrote it down and saved it. Now, this wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden snap. It It was a cold, calculated project and murder plot the family actually discussed. They refined. Like I said, they saved it on their computer like a corporate presentation. They called it Operation Custody, and it transformed the mother and Rosa into tactical operatives. The digital audit and search of Rosa's family home, where she was living with her mother and father, recovered a 10-point tactical checklist. The planning was forensic in detail, covering every variable of the assault. It was well thought out and calculated. The document detailed entry and exit points of Selma Hill's home and mapped out target zones in the hallway. It listed specific procurement items, including a 9mm handgun, tasers, zip ties, and neutralizing agents. But the most chilling entry was their research into succinylcholine, which is a paralyzing agent used in surgical settings to completely freeze every muscle in the human body, including the ones used to breathe. They didn't just want Eric dead. They wanted him fully conscious and physically incapable of resisting while they moved to the final phase of their plan. The plan included instructions on wearing gloves to prevent transfer of GSR or gunshot residue, and the specific use of a 32-gallon receptacle for quote-unquote waste management. The exact container where Selma's body was found. Data logs show months of research into how to paralyze a human being and the effect and range of various stun weapons. Most damning was the post-action section. It outlined a plan to dispose of the bodies and flee the state with the child. This wasn't a plan to protect a family. It was a blueprint for a double execution, documented with the same cold detachment as a grocery list. The most terrifying part of their family plan, which also included Rosa's father, wasn't the weapons or the tactical gear. It was the ending that they had scripted for Eric. They didn't just want him dead. They wanted him destroyed. The plan was to force Eric at gunpoint to sit down and write a final handwritten confession. In their twisted logic, this letter would be the ultimate victory, a father admitting to the very crimes that Rosa had accused him of. Untrue molestation of their daughter, providing a motive for his own self-death, and a clean exit for the women who had orchestrated it all. Ideally, their plan was to stage a fake confrontation between the grandmother, Selma, against her son over these fake allegations, and Eric, with his accused temper, would implode and kill his grandmother, thus providing the motive and pinning Selma's murder on Eric. According to the checklist, once they forced Eric's written self-confession, Eric would be executed using the 9mm handgun they had brought, pinning the entire double murder on Eric himself, who would no longer be around, which would then grant custody of their daughter Elizabeth back to Rosa and her family. Rosa and her mother Mai intended to close the case before it ever reached the forensic lab. They weren't just planning a double homicide. They were planning a narrative heist. While Rosa and Mai were the tactical hands in the hallway, their father, Ping Li, was the quiet architect of their mobility. He wasn't just witness to their obsession, he was the one who would drive the getaway vehicle, a U-Haul truck parked just down the street, ready to vanish with the family once the confession was signed. Ping Li sat in the cab, waiting for the signal that would never come. Silent partner in a plot that was about to erase his own future. In 2011, the legal audit reached its final conclusion. The jury found Rosa Hill and Mai Li guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances of lying in wait, along with attempted murder. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were processed into the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. For his role in the logistics and the flight of operation, Ping Li was convicted of being accessory to murder and conspiracy, and he was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. But there's one final data point that the Hill family couldn't account for in their quote-unquote Operation Custody checklist. Survival. Against every tactical advantage they held, Eric Hill lived. Today, he continues to live a private life, having successfully raised the daughter they tried to weaponize against him. The narrative heist failed, and the girl who was at the center of their obsession grew up far away from their dark blueprint. The Operation Custody document, once a digital blueprint for a new life, became the primary evidence that locked the 3 family members away for the remainder of their natural lives. The structural truth was final. The family that conspired together was dismantled together. Okay, that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. What's very striking about this story is how meticulously it was planned, how audacious and grandiose the plan was. It was very detailed. Also, was just how much of a close call it was. Consider this. Eric goes to his grandmother's house to do a welfare check, and luckily, by the grace of God, he brings his neighbors along. I don't know how that came about, but he brings his neighbors along, and they can hear him whimpering inside after this big old fight, and they are the ones that call the police. If they weren't there to call the police, quite honestly, I think Eric might have ended up murdered, and maybe they would have been suspicious about who actually committed the murder of his grandmother and the apparent self-death, but that doesn't mean they would have had the evidence, and that doesn't mean they would have been able to convict. So it's just like one of those stories that just sticks out in your head. Make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and quite honestly, please watch more videos. Watch a lot more videos. Keep watching some more videos. That'll be great for me. Anyway, that's all I got to yap about. That's the story. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.